For 3 mornings in a row, Park Ranger Daniel Mercer saw the same raccoon near the Eastern Service Road of Blackwater Ridge State Park. And on all 3 mornings, the animal carried something it should not have had. The first time, Daniel barely looked twice. Raccoons stole everything: sandwich wrappers, gloves, fishing tackle, plastic bags, even a visitor's car keys once. This one was a large adult with a torn right ear and the heavy gray coat common in the colder foothills of western Pennsylvania. It crossed the gravel road shortly after sunrise, something bright pink dragging from its mouth, then disappeared between mountain laurel and wet ferns before Daniel could identify what it was. The second morning he saw the animal near the same culvert. Again there was pink fabric hanging from its jaws. Daniel stopped his truck, but the raccoon immediately climbed the embankment and vanished into hardwood forest. On the third morning, heavy overnight rain had turned the service road dark with mud. Daniel rounded a bend and found the raccoon directly ahead of him, struggling to drag a long, soaked piece of fabric from beneath a fallen branch. Daniel stepped out. The animal released it and retreated several yards into the brush, watching him. What lay in the road was not discarded clothing. It was a woman's scarf, soft wool, pale pink, with a narrow row of embroidered white flowers at one end. Mud covered most of it, and several strands had been pulled loose where the raccoon had bitten the material. Daniel knew that scarf. He had seen it hanging around the neck of 36-year-old Emily Warren in the photograph taped beside the visitor center door for the last 9 days. Emily had disappeared during what was supposed to be a short afternoon hike inside Blackwater Ridge. Search teams had covered the official trails, ravines, overlooks, creek beds, parking areas, and more than 16 square miles of surrounding forest. Her backpack had been found beside a trail. Her car remained at the main parking lot. Dogs had lost her scent near a rocky junction, less than 2 miles from the visitor center. Investigators had begun considering the possibility that Emily was no longer inside the park at all. Now Daniel stood in a maintenance road searchers had barely examined, staring at a scarf the missing woman's sister had specifically described to police. The raccoon sat behind a tree 20 feet away, wet paws pressed against the bark. Daniel did not touch the scarf. He called dispatch and said 5 words that restarted the entire search. "I think I found Emily's scarf." Daniel Mercer was 51 and had worked at Blackwater Ridge for 17 years. He had entered the Ranger Service after 12 years in the Army and had discovered that managing a state park involved far less peaceful contemplation than visitors imagined. During summer, he dealt with lost hikers, illegal fires, drunken campers, injured cyclists, arguments over campsites, bears attracted to coolers, broken toilets, fallen trees, stolen signs, and people who apparently believed a handwritten map on social media was superior to marked trails. Autumn brought hunters wandering across boundaries. Winter brought motorists who ignored road closures. Spring brought flooding. Daniel still loved the job. The park covered nearly 30,000 acres of forest, steep ridges, abandoned logging roads, and narrow streams feeding the Allegheny River watershed. Some sections received thousands of visitors every month. Others could go weeks without seeing a person. Daniel knew the main trail network better than anyone on staff, and many of the forgotten service roads almost as well. The eastern road where he found the scarf had once been used by forestry crews, but was officially closed to public vehicles after a bridge washed out 8 years earlier. Daniel drove it only because he was checking drainage after the storm. There was no reason Emily should have been there. According to everything investigators had reconstructed, she entered Blackwater Ridge from the opposite side of the park. Emily Warren had arrived alone on a Tuesday afternoon. She was a middle school art teacher from Pittsburgh and an experienced recreational hiker, though not a wilderness specialist. Security footage from the parking area showed her stepping from a dark blue Honda at 1:18 p.m. She wore charcoal hiking pants, a green rain shell tied around her waist, gray boots, and the pink scarf because the September afternoon had started unusually cool. She carried a small blue day pack and a water bottle. At the visitor center, she spoke briefly with seasonal ranger Melissa Crane and asked about Eagle View Loop, a moderate 7-mile trail climbing toward an overlook. Melissa warned her that part of the western connector was muddy after recent rain. Emily bought a trail map, sent a photograph of it to her younger sister Lauren, and began hiking around 1:35. At 2:47, she texted Lauren a photograph from Eagle View. The image showed distant hills beneath a clear sky. Her final message arrived at 3:12. Heading back. Should be at car before 5. At 6:30, Lauren tried calling. No answer. At 7:15, she contacted park staff. Daniel was one of the first rangers dispatched. They found Emily's car locked. No sign of her around the parking lot. Searchers entered the trail system with lights before 9 o'clock. Her blue backpack was found shortly after midnight beside Fern Hollow Trail, nearly a mile from the route she told Lauren she planned to follow. Inside were her wallet, trail map, portable charger, snacks, first aid kit, and car keys. Her phone was missing. That alone worried Daniel. Experienced hikers might put down a bag while injured or confused, but leaving keys, food, and emergency supplies behind while carrying only a phone made little sense. The pack was dry despite damp ground beneath it, suggesting it had not been there very long. Search dogs picked up Emily's scent and followed it east approximately 600 yards before becoming confused around a rocky section crossed by deer, searchers, and several public trails. The scent eventually disappeared near an old picnic access road. Police investigated whether Emily entered a vehicle willingly or was forced into one. Parking cameras showed multiple cars leaving during the relevant period, but none obviously connected to her. 9 days later, she remained missing. Daniel knew missing person searches rarely followed clean narratives. The public wanted one clue to lead to another until someone was found. Real searches produced dozens of meaningless details: a glove that belonged to somebody else, a footprint too old to date, a hiker who thought she heard screaming but later admitted it might have been a fox, a witness who was certain she saw Emily at a gas station before security footage proved the woman was someone else. Search coordinators had already followed hundreds of possibilities. That was why Daniel forced himself not to attach too much significance to the raccoon. The animal did not understand the scarf. It had probably found soft nesting material and dragged it from somewhere nearby. But that simple explanation made the location valuable. If the raccoon picked up the scarf near its den, then somewhere inside its relatively small home range was a place Emily or whoever possessed her belongings had passed. Detective Sarah Mitchell arrived with 2 deputies and a search coordinator. Lauren Warren was called and asked to identify photographs. She confirmed the scarf immediately. "I gave it to her last Christmas," she said. "She wore it constantly." Forensic technicians recovered several long brown hairs caught in the weave. Later testing confirmed they matched Emily. More interesting was the condition of the fabric. One end had a clean tear as though caught and ripped rather than intentionally removed. There were traces of dried leaves, pine needles, and fine orange dust inconsistent with the dark forest soil where Daniel found it. Blackwater Ridge contained patches of orange clay, but mainly southeast of the old quarry district. The scarf may have traveled with the raccoon, but probably not far enough to explain material from miles away. Search planners expanded the grid east and south. Daniel showed Sarah where the raccoon disappeared. "Den nearby?" she asked. "Maybe. Could be in a tree cavity. Could be under rocks. They move." "How far would it carry fabric?" "A few hundred yards wouldn't surprise me. More is possible." Sarah looked up the steep wooded slope. "So we searched the animal's neighborhood." Daniel nodded. "Basically." Teams spread along the embankment. Within 2 hours, they found a hollow sycamore containing shredded paper, food packaging, cloth scraps, and several objects apparently collected by raccoons. Among them was a torn corner from a topographic map. It was not the visitor map found in Emily's backpack. This was a detailed waterproof map sold at outdoor stores. Daniel noticed a handwritten circle around an abandoned fire tower in the southeastern park. Investigators could not immediately establish that the map belonged to Emily, but Lauren remembered something. Emily had mentioned wanting to photograph old structures. 2 weeks before the hike, she sent Lauren a social media post showing the abandoned Mercer Fire Tower, which had been closed to public access for nearly a decade. She said it looked creepy but beautiful, Lauren told detectives. "I told her not to go climbing abandoned things." Daniel knew the tower. It sat approximately 5 miles from where Emily should have been hiking and was not shown on ordinary visitor maps. Reaching it required leaving marked trails and following remnants of an old logging route. Could Emily have changed plans? Possibly. But why abandon her backpack first? And why had search dogs tracked her scent away from Eagle View rather than toward the tower? Detectives obtained Emily's browsing history after Lauren provided access to her home computer. She had searched Mercer Fire Tower several times and downloaded an old topographic map. That made the map fragment potentially hers. Her phone records then revealed another detail overlooked because it had seemed insignificant. At 3:26 p.m., 14 minutes after telling Lauren she was heading back, Emily received a 5-minute call from an unknown prepaid number. Her device moved east afterward rather than west toward the parking lot. The phone stopped transmitting ordinary location data at 4:11, but a final network connection placed it somewhere in the southeastern portion of Blackwater Ridge. Police had originally believed the tower location too imprecise to matter because signal coverage was poor. Now it matched the map clue. Someone may have contacted Emily and given her a reason to change direction. The search shifted toward the old fire tower. Daniel joined because he knew the forestry roads. Nothing about the route was easy. Fallen trees blocked vehicles after the first mile. Searchers continued on foot through wet forest. The tower itself stood on a narrow ridge surrounded by young birch and hemlock. Its lower stairs had been removed years earlier to prevent climbing. The small ranger cabin beside it had collapsed on one side. Teams found no Emily, but behind the cabin, Sarah discovered a recently cut length of rope attached to an old post. Nearby were tire impressions from an ATV. Public vehicles were prohibited in that section. Daniel crouched beside the tracks. Could be maintenance. Was anyone here last week? Not ours. The forestry department confirmed no crews had been authorized. Searchers followed the impressions east along an old logging trail until rain erased them. A mile farther, one volunteer found a torn strip of green nylon snagged on blackberry thorns. Lauren identified the color as matching Emily's rain shell. Laboratory analysis later confirmed the fabric was consistent with the jacket recovered nowhere else. The trail descended toward the old Blackwater Quarry, a privately operated limestone site that closed 14 years earlier. Most of its property had been acquired by the state, but remained fenced because of unstable pits, collapsed buildings, and dangerous vertical cuts. The quarry had already been searched from the air during the initial operation, but nobody had entered every building. Now Daniel and Sarah approached an old maintenance shed at the southern edge. The door had been secured with a chain that looked much newer than the structure. Sarah stopped everyone. Nobody touches it. A warrant and property authorization brought investigators inside that afternoon. The shed contained rusted machine parts, old drums, nesting birds, and evidence that someone had used one corner recently. Bottled water, canned food, a folding chair, a sleeping bag, batteries, and a cheap prepaid phone charger. There was also a woman's green rain shell folded beneath a plastic tarp. Emily's. Daniel felt the familiar mixture of hope and dread experienced during searches when evidence became more personal. A location meant progress. It could also mean they were moving towards something terrible. No blood was visible. No signs suggested a fatal assault. On a workbench, investigators found printed photographs. Many were landscape shots of Blackwater Ridge, trail junctions, parking areas, and abandoned park structures. Several showed Emily. Not posed photographs, distant images taken without her apparent knowledge. Emily leaving school, entering a grocery store, walking beside her apartment building. The case changed instantly from a lost hiker investigation to a targeted abduction. Police examined everyone in Emily's life: ex-partners, co-workers, parents of students, neighbors, people who contacted her online. One name emerged quickly: Jason Hale, 42, a freelance wildlife photographer who met Emily 6 months earlier during a community art event. They had gone on 3 dates. Emily ended contact after becoming uncomfortable with the amount of personal information Jason seemed to know about her. She told Lauren he had shown up twice at places she had not told him she would be. Nothing threatening enough for police involvement had occurred, but she blocked his number in July. Jason told investigators he had not spoken with Emily since. He said he spent the day she disappeared photographing elk 60 miles north. Camera metadata supported that claim for the morning, but there was a gap between 1 o'clock and 8 o'clock p.m. His vehicle was a dark SUV with a hitch-mounted carrier capable of transporting an ATV. He also knew Blackwater Ridge extraordinarily well. Years earlier, he had volunteered with a wildlife survey that used restricted forestry roads. Police searched his home after finding several social media accounts connected to him had viewed Emily's hiking posts. The initial search produced no direct evidence of kidnapping. His cameras did not contain the photographs found at the quarry. His SUV had been cleaned recently, but showed no obvious trace of Emily. Jason remained free while investigators worked. Meanwhile, forensic examination of the quarry shed produced a fingerprint belonging not to Jason, but to 63-year-old Raymond Hale, Jason's father. Raymond had worked as a maintenance foreman at Blackwater Quarry until it closed. He retained keys to several buildings and knew abandoned service roads throughout the region. He lived alone on a small property approximately 15 miles away. When detectives visited, he said he had not entered the quarry in years. The fingerprint might easily have been old. But Sarah asked him one question that changed his demeanor. "Did your son use the old maintenance shed?" Raymond answered too quickly. "No." Investigators checked utility and purchase records. 6 weeks earlier, Raymond bought a new chain and padlock of the same model found on the shed. Raymond was questioned formally. He eventually admitted allowing Jason to store photography equipment at the quarry. He likes wildlife, doesn't want people stealing expensive cameras. When shown images of Emily found inside, Raymond said he knew nothing about them. Detectives believe parts of that answer. Jason may have used the shed without telling his father exactly why. Yet the bigger problem remained. Emily was not there. The food supplies had been touched within perhaps 3 days, suggesting someone still visited. Investigators quietly placed surveillance on the quarry rather than immediately arresting Jason. 2 nights later, a man entered through the eastern fence on foot. He did not approach the shed. Instead, he continued along a drainage road toward the far southern boundary. Officers followed from distance. The man was Jason. He walked almost 2 miles to an old quarry pumping station, half hidden in woodland. There he unlocked a steel service door. Police moved in. Jason surrendered immediately. Inside the pumping station, they found another sleeping area. Food, clothing, first aid supplies, and several of Emily's belongings. But no Emily. Sarah later said that was the worst moment of the entire case. They finally had the suspect and still did not know whether the victim was alive. Jason refused to answer questions without an attorney. Searchers began combing the quarry and surrounding forest again. His phone contained recently deleted messages exchanged with Raymond. One read, "You need to move her before somebody goes down there." Raymond was arrested. Faced with the message, he stopped protecting his son. According to Raymond, Jason called him on the evening Emily disappeared and said something had gone wrong. Raymond went to the quarry and found Emily there, frightened but alive. Jason claimed he only wanted to talk to her and convince her to stop telling people lies about him. He had used a prepaid phone to call, pretending to be a photographer Emily had contacted online about the fire tower. He told her he had found an injured owl near the abandoned site and needed help documenting it before contacting wildlife staff. Emily was interested in animal photography and altered her hike. Jason met her on the trail. At some point, she realized who he was and tried to leave. He took her phone. The confrontation escalated. Rather than let her return and report him, Jason forced her toward the quarry using an ATV parked nearby. Raymond insisted he wanted Jason to release her. Instead, he helped conceal the situation because he feared his son would go to prison. Over several days, they moved Emily between the quarry shed and pumping station. Then 3 nights before police found the pink scarf, something unexpected happened. Emily escaped. The story suddenly returned to the Raccoon. Emily waited until Jason left the pumping station and Raymond fell asleep in a chair outside. She had discovered that one of the old ventilation panels could be removed from inside. She squeezed through, cutting her arm and tearing clothing. She ran north through forest without a phone or map. It was dark. Rain began before midnight. Emily followed water downhill because she hoped a creek would eventually lead toward a road. Somewhere along the way, her pink scarf caught on thorny brush. She pulled free and kept moving. By dawn, she had traveled several miles but badly misjudged direction. Instead of reaching developed areas, she entered one of the park's most remote drainage basins. The escaped scarf remained caught in vegetation. A raccoon found it. Investigators now knew Emily had escaped alive 3 nights earlier. That transformed the search. Dogs were brought to the location where the scarf likely originated, determined from debris caught in its weave in the raccoon's range. Teams searched outward. Helicopters used thermal cameras. Rangers checked every old cabin, culvert, hunter shelter, and forestry structure. Daniel joined a team moving along Millstone Creek. At approximately 2:40 in the afternoon, they found a footprint in mud. Human. Small hiking boot. Heading downstream. Then another. Several hundred yards farther, they discovered an empty emergency food wrapper caught between rocks. It did not belong to Emily. It was old enough to be useless. But the footprints continued. Near sunset, a search volunteer heard something. Not shouting, metal striking metal. 3 faint impacts. They stopped. Again. Daniel called, "Emily?" Silence. Then, "Hello." A woman's voice. Weak. From across the creek. Searchers ran toward an abandoned forestry shelter hidden beneath trees. Emily Warren was inside. Alive. She had reached the shelter the previous afternoon after becoming too exhausted to continue. One ankle was badly swollen from a fall. She had survived on creek water treated with purification tablets she found in an old emergency cache stored inside the shelter, plus 2 ancient energy bars that tasted, she later said, like compressed drywall. She had tried walking that morning but could barely put weight on the injured ankle. When she heard searchers, she struck a metal cup against the shelter frame. Daniel was one of the first people through the doorway. Emily stared at his uniform. "Are you actually a ranger?" "Yes." She began crying. Daniel crouched several feet away. "My sister?" She never stopped looking. Emily covered her face. A rescue helicopter could not land directly in the dense drainage, so a ground team stabilized her ankle and carried her toward a clearing. Daniel walked beside the litter for part of the journey. Halfway out, Emily noticed something attached to his pack, a transparent evidence pouch. Inside was a photograph of the pink scarf investigators had distributed to search teams. "My scarf." Daniel looked at her. "A raccoon had it." Emily stared. "A what?" "A raccoon." Despite exhaustion, she laughed. "You're kidding." "No. That stupid scarf." "Pretty useful scarf." She shook her head. "My sister gave it to me." "I know." That silenced her. The reunion between Emily and Lauren happened at the hospital without cameras present. Lauren later told Daniel only one detail. When she entered the room, Emily said, "I told you I'd be back before dinner." Lauren answered, "You're 11 days late." Then both cried. Jason Hale was charged with kidnapping, stalking-related offenses, unlawful imprisonment, assault, and multiple other crimes. Raymond faced charges for assisting in the confinement and obstructing investigators. Prosecutors argued that while Raymond did not initiate the abduction, his decision to protect his adult son kept Emily imprisoned longer and put her life at risk. Both eventually received prison sentences. The public story focused almost immediately on the raccoon. Headlines simplified everything. Raccoon helps find missing hiker. Park ranger follows raccoon's clue to abducted woman. Pink scarf carried from woods leads to miracle rescue. Daniel hated most of them. The raccoon had not led him to Emily. It had not deliberately brought evidence to humans. It had not understood the scarf's importance. The animal found soft fabric in the woods and attempted to use it or investigate it, behavior entirely normal for an opportunistic raccoon. But Daniel also refused to call the animal irrelevant. Without the scarf, investigators might eventually have discovered the quarry through other evidence. Or not. They might have arrested Jason. They might have learned Emily escaped. Search teams might have expanded into Millstone Creek. There were many possible paths. The scarf simply accelerated one of them. Emily understood the distinction. During her only substantial interview after recovering, a reporter asked, "Do you feel the raccoon saved your life?" Emily smiled. "No." The reporter seemed surprised. "Why not?" "Because a lot of people worked extremely hard to find me." She listed rangers, police, search volunteers, forensic teams, helicopter crews, her sister, and strangers who distributed posters. Then she added, "But I'm very grateful that particular raccoon apparently had terrible taste in accessories." The clip went viral. Months later, Emily returned to Blackwater Ridge. Not alone. Lauren came with her. Daniel met them near the visitor center. Emily had recovered physically, though faint scars remained along one forearm, and she still attended therapy for trauma. "I'm not hiking 7 miles, Lauren announced. Emily rolled her eyes. "We're walking half a mile." I've heard your estimates. Daniel took them to the service road where the scarf was found. The place looked ordinary. Wet leaves, ferns. A drainage ditch. Nothing marked it. Emily stood quietly. So he was here? Or she, Daniel said. Never confirmed sex. The famous raccoon. Unfortunately, Emily laughed. Did you ever see it again? Several times. And? Still a raccoon. Disappointing. They walked toward the sycamore den. Daniel stopped at a respectful distance. Wildlife staff had asked visitors not to approach after online attention resulted in people trying to locate the animal. Emily stared at the tree. I thought the scarf was gone because it caught on something. Probably exactly what happened. I remember being angry. About losing it. About everything. But yes, I remember thinking, Lauren is going to kill me because I lost that stupid Christmas scarf. Lauren folded her arms. It was expensive. Emily smiled. Then her expression changed. When you're running like that, your brain thinks about weird things. Daniel said nothing. I was scared I was going to die, but I also kept thinking I hadn't finished grading a stack of 7th grade paintings. Sounds normal. Really? As normal as anything in that situation. She looked toward the woods. Sometimes I still think I should have known it was Jason on the phone. Daniel answered immediately. No. Emily turned. He knew what I liked. Old buildings. Wildlife photography. He made it sound believable. That's why manipulation works. I changed my route. You were lied to. But no. Daniel rarely interrupted visitors. This time he did. There's a difference between making a normal decision based on false information and causing what happened afterward. Emily looked at him for a moment, then nodded. Therapist says basically the same thing. Your therapist sounds smart. She charges more. They continued walking. Before leaving, Lauren gave Daniel a small paper bag. For the break room. Inside were cookies shaped like raccoons wearing pink scarves. Daniel stared. This is what my career has become. Emily smiled. You started it. The raccoon started it. Excellent. Blame wildlife. The scarf itself was returned after trial. Most of it was ruined. Mud stains remained. The raccoon had torn several holes. One embroidered end was missing completely. Lauren assumed Emily would throw it away. She did not. She washed it gently and stored it inside a small shadow box. Beside it, she placed the trail map from that day and a photograph taken several months after her rescue. Not a photograph of the raccoon, a photograph of Lauren and Emily standing together at Eagle View. The caption read, "Back before dinner. Eventually." Daniel saw it years later when Emily sent him a picture. He smiled. The raccoon continued living near the eastern section for at least 2 more seasons. Daniel recognized the torn ear. He occasionally saw it crossing the service road at dawn. Sometimes it carried food, once a discarded glove. Another time what appeared to be half a blue plastic tarp. Daniel never followed it. He also never ignored it entirely. That was the lasting change. Before Emily's case, unusual animal behavior was mostly background information to him unless it indicated wildlife problems. Afterward, he became more attentive to objects animals moved, not because he expected another crime, because human belongings traveled in strange ways outdoors. Birds collected string, foxes carried gloves, coyotes moved clothing, raccoons dragged fabric. Most discoveries meant nothing. Once in a while, they meant something. Blackwater Ridge later changed its missing person protocols. Closed service roads received more systematic early searches when circumstances suggested a person could have left designated trails. Older forestry structures were added to emergency maps. Cameras were installed at several secondary access points. Staff received additional training on stalking and targeted abduction indicators. Daniel considered those changes far more important than the famous raccoon. Several years later, he became chief ranger. His hair turned almost entirely gray. His knees objected to steep trails. New seasonal employees arrived every spring. Eventually, one recognized his name. Wait, you're the raccoon guy. Daniel closed his eyes. Please don't call me that. The missing hiker case. Yes. Did a raccoon really bring you her scarf? No. The employee looked confused. Daniel explained. The raccoon had dragged the scarf only a limited distance. Daniel happened to see it. The object redirected the search. The search produced other evidence. Investigators uncovered the crime. Emily escaped largely through her own determination. Search teams found her. That version's longer, the employee said. Reality usually is. But the raccoon helped. Daniel considered the question. Yes. How much? Not enough to put him on payroll. The young ranger laughed. Daniel did too. Emily remained in occasional contact. She returned to teaching after one semester away. Later, she helped her district develop safety education about stalking and online privacy, though she avoided making her own experience the center of the program. She continued hiking. That surprised people. It did not surprise Daniel. People assumed surviving something terrible in a place meant you had to abandon that kind of place forever. Emily refused. She hiked differently. She shared routes, carried a satellite communicator, did not follow mysterious calls toward abandoned towers, but she still went outside. 5 years after her rescue, Daniel received a postcard. Front, a mountain lake in Colorado. Back, 9 miles today. Stayed on trail. Kept my scarf. No raccoons involved. Emily. He pinned it inside his office. One autumn morning not long afterward, Daniel drove the Eastern Service Road alone. Fog sat low among the trees. Leaves had begun turning orange. Near the same bend where he found Emily's scarf, something moved beside the ditch. A raccoon. Probably not the same one. Too many years had passed for certainty, and this animal had 2 intact ears. It was holding a piece of red fabric. Daniel stopped the truck. He stared. The raccoon stared back. For God's sake! He got out. The animal dropped the fabric and disappeared. Daniel approached. He felt a ridiculous flicker of tension. He lifted the object with a stick. It was a torn fast food uniform cap. Nothing else. No name. No missing person. No mystery. Daniel laughed alone beside the road. He left the fabric for maintenance cleanup and returned to his truck. That ordinary ending pleased him, because nearly every unusual object in the woods was simply litter. Nearly every strange animal behavior had an ordinary explanation. That was how reality worked. But Emily Warren was alive because, among hundreds of ordinary details, enough meaningful ones were noticed in time. A downloaded map, a suspicious phone call, an illegal ATV track, a locked quarry shed, a torn jacket, a father protecting his son, footprints along a creek, and before many of those pieces came together, a pink scarf dragging through wet leaves in the mouth of a raccoon. The raccoon never knew whose scarf it was. It never knew a woman was missing. It never knew Daniel recognized the embroidered flowers from a photograph beside the visitor center. It was simply doing what raccoons do: investigating, collecting, carrying. The meaning belonged entirely to the humans who saw what it carried. And perhaps that was what Daniel remembered most clearly. Not that an animal had somehow understood a human emergency, but that something completely ordinary crossed his path, carrying one detail he happened to recognize. Sometimes that was all a search needed, not a miracle. Just the right clue appearing in front of the right person before it disappeared back into the woods,